Hi everybody, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It is October 12th today, Saturday, and I'm sitting down to make a full moon video. The full moon is going to come through in Aries in the next 48 hours, and it is also going to engage with a T-square to the planet Pluto in Capricorn. So um, that's about as dynamic a transit you could have exactly at the time of a full moon. And what's also really interesting about this full moon is that it's happening at the same time that Venus is perfecting an opposition to the planet Uranus. So I want to show you these transits on the screen to start off with so that you can see exactly what's going on. So again, two major transits basically perfecting at the same time this weekend. The first of them is Venus's opposition to Uranus, which perfects today into tomorrow. So here you can see Venus in Scorpio opposing Uranus in Taurus. That perfects in the next 24 to 48 hours. I already did a video on that earlier in the week. If you want to go back and revisit that, you can get a much more in-depth look at that transit. That one's perfecting today. Meanwhile, in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, you're going to get the full moon. So watch what happens if we take this up a full day from now. And then what you're going to see is the moon in Aries moving into opposition with the sun. That's always what happens at the time of a full moon. And then both, when they hit 20 degrees and it's full, will be square to Pluto in Capricorn. So it's a very Plutonian full moon. That's a lot to deal with, especially at the same time that you have a major opposition like Venus opposite Uranus taking place. So what can we expect from this? Excuse me. Well, a couple of things to take note of. One, which I mentioned earlier in the week with Venus opposite Uranus, is the potential for basically cancellations, departures, disruptions, or sudden changes when it comes to relationships. That's the Venus element of it. Uranus is the sudden, disruptive, eccentric, shocking change. And oppositions imply separation because they imply opposites. Either some kind of really unique creative synthesis is coming through right now, or some kind of parting of ways, some kind of separation, and it might be a little bit more sudden, unexpected, a little bit disruptive, like that. For example, as I'm making this video, I can hear in the other room my two daughters in some kind of cage match with one another. So my production, Venus, is being disrupted, Uranus. But you can watch for this energy in the next 24 to 48 hours. Now, because that's happening while Venus is in Mars's sign and Mars is in Venus's sign, and because the full moon is taking place in the Mars-ruled sign of Aries, there is a real tension between Mars and Venus right now. Venus wants peace, love, friendship, desire, happiness, enjoyment. Mars is the reality that we have to fight, scramble, hustle, compete, and try to dominate sometimes in order to get what we want, or in order to have peace. It seems like there's a contradiction. This is why Venus and Mars, or Aries and Aphrodite, were illicit, lovers, adulterous lovers in Greek mythology, because the truth is that peace loves war and war loves peace. What do you fight for? You fight so that you can have what you want to enjoy, or some state of being that you desire. What does Venus want? Venus wants whatever we think of as happy, beautiful, joyful, etc. That's what Venus wants. So, but Venus has to deal with the reality that there's limited resources and that competition in this world exists, right? So Venus, Mars. Venus is in Mars' sign of Scorpio. Mars is in Libra, which is Venus' sign. They're debilitated, each of them, by being in each other's signs in environments they're not comfortable with, but by virtue of being in one another's signs, they also share what is referred to as mutual reception. That means that something, like, even though Venus opposite Uranus too represents sudden disruptions in relationships. Like, for example, yesterday I got a string of emails that were all canceling things, or rescheduling things, or even people. In one case, I had someone who was going to be taking a private apprenticeship with me who canceled. Right, so those things happen. Just that they just that happens. But when it all happens in a row, when you see it, whenever you see, it raining, a pattern of some kind, look at the planet, see what's going on. You go, oh, okay, got it. So, but then there's always the potential, when there's mutual debility, for something good to come out of something difficult. Oftentimes we get transits wrong, specifically because we think that they are tests that we have to get right. That's where we get troubled with astrological transits. So, for example, you have this energy coming through this weekend, and you have, let's say that some disruption shows up in a relationship, or there's this tension and conflict in the air, right? That's safe to say with a full moon in Mars's sign, god of war, and with Venus, the goddess of love, opposed by Uranus, the planet of sudden disruptions and sudden unexpected changes. So you're thinking to yourself, I've got to get this right. I've got to get this right. I can't, I got to make sure nothing crazy or bad happens. We're all of us, if we're thinking that way, and I think that way myself sometimes about astrology too. It's hard not to. It's part of our anxiety complex that we all have about being human. But if I start thinking that way, I've already got it wrong. If you start thinking that way, well, I've got to make sure I get this right this weekend, that nothing bad happens, already getting it wrong. There is a way to get wrong things right and to get right things wrong. one of my favorite scriptural teachings, which I repeat often, so if you listen to my channel, you've heard me say it a bunch, but is that the simple admonitions, the simple teachings really of Jesus, the top two. His disciples said, so like, what's most important? And he goes, love God and love one another. We see the same thing repeated in different ways, different masks, different language in Buddhism and yoga, even in Native American and indigenous traditions, where we're taught to love the spirit of nature and treat every living being with respect. In all of these traditions, the goal is love. The goal is intimacy and union with our source, and by extension with one another, and with the world, with the environment. So if that is the goal, think about if that's the goal, that's a relational goal, right? It's not like get a PhD goal, or write a dissertation goal, or get an A, or kill your SAT, or whatever. It's not some impersonal, objectively measurable goal. The achievements of the heart, the fruit that we taste when we've achieved something spiritually, has to do with taste. It has to do with intimacy. And that's not something you can measure. Like, for example, in a relationship with my daughter, right? Yesterday she wanted a popsicle. We're here at the beach celebrating our 5-year wedding anniversary. My daughter wanted a popsicle, a Wonder Woman popsicle, by the way, that showed her like, all crazy. And I was like, okay, she's been on really good behavior. And so I'm measuring like whether or not she deserves the treat. And that's the way that we think all the time, right? I'm in measurement. Well, have I put in enough work that I deserve some result, right? That's the world of karma kanda. That's what the Vedas call it. That's the world of measurable efforts and measurable results. And we're trained that way. Like, even as a parent, I feel so crappy. I'm like, the Wonder Woman popsicle is bad, but it's not so much bad. It's only a little bad. Corn syrup or whatever the hell it has in it that's not good is some small amount of bad. Okay, so for because we don't give her popsicles or whatever. So she wants a popsicle, like, okay, it's a little bit of bad. I'm measuring it. And then I'm going, well, how's her behavior been? And I'm measuring that, and then I'm weighing the scales, and right? This is how we operate in the world, like, all the time. And then we think, well, if I'm good, I should get something, and if I'm bad, then I should get some other kind of result. That's the world of karma. That's the world of karma kanda. That is not the world of intimacy. That is not a personal world. That is an objectifying world to live in. Is it real? Yeah. Yeah, it's real. You can live in that world. We all do every day, where there are objective material results based on actions, consequences of actions, yay or nay, good or bad. The scales lift, the scales go one way and the other. That's how this world works. But that is not how intimacy works. That's not how love works. And that's not how the soul works. So how does the soul work? Well, let me give you another example of how you can get something right that's actually wrong. How many of you have been in a relationship before and you say to your partner the exact right thing, and then they say, I don't really like the way you said that. Right? Or like my daughter, she'll come up to me 20 minutes now. She's almost 4. She's really clever. She'll come up to me 20 minutes before she wants something and offer to do something really good, right? And then I find out 20 minutes later, now can I have a popsicle? Do you know what I mean? And then it's like, wait a second. You weren't really being good for the sake of being good. You were being good because you want to get something good. And then it's like, yeah, but can we blame her? Can I blame my daughter for doing that? Like, that's so much the operating program of this world. That's how I am. That's how I act. I reinforce that behavior by giving her treats for good behavior, like all this stuff. You know what I mean? So, in this world, real intimacy, how do you build real love, real intimacy? So much of the time, it's not about getting it right as much as it is, for example, how you get it wrong. When you get it wrong, when an astrological transit comes through, like a crazy Venus-Uranus opposition with a full moon in, Mars's sign of Aries with a T-squared, a freaking Pluto, whatever, like this intense energy that's coming through, you put pressure on yourself. Well, I got to get this right so that I advance spiritually. You're objectifying your spiritual life. I'm objectifying my spiritual life. Instead, if we say, I'm going to do my best, and damn it, if I get it wrong, I'm going to do it soulfully. If I get it wrong, I'm going to do so with courage and love and reflectiveness. And that's how I'm going to do it if I get it wrong. And then you go and you try your best to do the right thing, to make choices and navigate through the landscape of an astrological transit with integrity, peace, patience, compassion, kindness, and making it as real as possible. You just do your best. And then if something happens, it doesn't work out, then so much of getting it right spiritually is about how you got it wrong. For example, when my daughter does something that she knows is wrong, and I see in her heart that her mood changes. She smacks her sister, and then you can see she feels bad. That's when, as a parent, I say, it's okay, come here, let's talk about it, And then we have a little talk, and we talk about how the main thing is that you felt like that wasn't the good thing to do, Good, you have a good heart, And then she sees me as someone other than a lollipop giver. Do you know what I mean? And so material reality is like that. It's more of a lollipop giver, but the spirit infused within material reality, all sentient beings that make material reality alive, not just the laws of how the material stuff works chemically or with the forces of physics, but the spirit behind it. The spirit, the way that it speaks and it moves, has to be discovered, has to be uncovered, has to be brought out. And how is it brought out? It's brought out through intimate responses to physical human experiences. Intimate responses means curiosity, it means thankfulness, it means gratitude, it means reflectiveness, it means patience, it means staying and participating in something. So I say all this just to encourage all of you. It's kind of a wild astrological weekend, but stick in it. Just stay with it. Do your best. Keep your heart open, Okay, so Venus opposite Uranus can disrupt things pretty big time. And Venus, Mars, something good can come out of those disruptions right now. Some kind of agreement or some kind of resolution creatively, because Venus and Mars, though both debilitated, they're in each other's signs. Mutual reception means something good can come out of it. So disagreements, a slew of cancellations, rescheduling, your plot path gets interrupted by things you weren't expecting. There's challenges that come through. Think about how to respond to that soulfully. And that's really where the reward is, because the reward is that you get to feel better about life and everything happening in life, whether it's good or bad, and you get to feel good about your heart and the source that your heart is connected to. You now begin to see reflected in all things. This is not an idea. With astrology, this is a practice. This is what we use astrology for. This is why we do it. So That's the spiritual message. Let's talk a little bit more about Pluto square the sun. So Pluto square to the sun, which is happening at the full moon, while the full moon in Aries also square to Pluto. So both of those, that Plutonian engagement with the full moon, first of all, can have major psychosomatic symptoms because the moon is like the mirror of the body and the mirror of the mind. And so when Pluto comes through and it's full and it's in Mars's sign, you got to watch for temper, you got to watch for hot things, irritating things, God of War things, showing up in your body. This is why it's a more accident-prone time. Like this morning, I accidentally sprayed a little bug spray in my eye. Thankfully, I got it out really easily. I smacked my head on the refrigerator. My daughter poked herself with something sharp. So be careful because Moon is opposite Mars today. Moon in Mars's sign, with Mars currently debilitated, and then Pluto engaged. It's an easy time to be totally transformed and reborn and go through some kind of cathartic, Plutonian experience. But you can do so in a way that's really not so fun when Mars is involved and you let some form of agitation or conflict really consume you. Now, remember, even if you do, don't give yourself a failing grade. You haven't failed until you respond. How you respond to whatever happens is where where we make or break our spiritual progress. So just remember that. The full moon square to Pluto, it can show up in the mind and body. Rebirthing and more agitating, aggressive, confrontational experiences. So be careful of that. Remember, with Mars Venus mutual reception, something good can come out of this if we stick with it, if we're patient, if we expect that a peaceful compromise will happen if we don't give in to irritated reactions. Sun square Pluto, challenges to authority figures, challenges to presidents, challenges to anything that stands as a unifying principle, idea, thought, mission, vision statement, including things like a self-concept or an ego or the head of state or the president or a leader, something that the sun would represent, something that organizing, stabilizing, a center around which everything else rotates. It can be fathers, it can be people in power, challenges, direct challenges to them, abuse of power, Plutonian elements with people in power, which might be kind of Machiavellian. So you just watch for that kind of deeper, heavier, darker, transformative energy around people or things that are in power or central somehow. Probably conflict oriented with the full moon happening at the same time in a Mars ruled sign. Okay, so that's what you got to watch for the next couple days. I'm going to leave you with this thought from Plato. Plato said we are not earthly, but heavenly plants. He's talking about human beings. He said we are not earthly, but heavenly plants. That is beautiful, first of all. And I want to add to it this thought that in the Bhakti tradition, it said that love of God, love of source, and by extension, love of the source that is in all things, love of one another, that this is the primary motive of spiritual life. If we try to make it an objective goal, right, like passing a test, we're failing because it's from our heart that we advance in this practice, right? In this practice of love. The Bhakti scriptures talk about the seed of devotion, of love for ourselves, of love of source, of love of everything and others, as the seed of this devotion sprouts. It grows into a little creeper, like a vine, and it needs a trunk or a tree around which to wrap itself as it grows. We are heavenly, not material plants, right? That's Plato. The same thing in Bhakti. Though we're made of matter, and though we might need the trunk of a tree, we might need the material world, we might need to learn how to use the raw material data and experiences of the material world as partnering agents in the growth and development of love. That ultimately what we're trying to do is wrap ourselves and entwine ourselves deeper and deeper with the spiritualizing presence in all of our experiences, in all of life, so that our vine of love and devotion for ourselves, for the universe, for each other, can grow. So the vine can wrap around the tree and move upward so that we can join with our starry nature, even as we're in this material world. The name for a liberated person while still in the body in the yoga philosophy is Jiva Mukta. So if we want to be Jiva Muktas, if we want to be liberated souls, liberated beings, we have to learn how to create a spiritual culture. We have to learn how to find that spiritual trunk that's central to our life and wrap everything, relate everything back so that we can wrap around it and grow in love and devotion. That the vine hugs and clings to the tree just as the tree gives the vine support. In this sense, every living soul in the entire creation in relation to the source is feminine, or as you can think of it as a relational lover. And that's really what we're trying to do, is cultivate relationship and love. So as we're doing that, every transit, just like the transits this weekend, Venus opposite Uranus, fun, right? um, whether it's a revolution in style or a sudden change in a relationship, how do we take that experience, see it from the standpoint of the cultivation of love, and say, you were difficult, but I love you, or that was crazy, but beautiful. This was unexpected, but I'm choosing to see heaven in it. How do we keep that alive and awake? It's like a fire. We have to tend it. We have to fan the flame all the time. But as we're doing that, right, as we're relating and dovetailing all of our material circumstances and experiences back to the desire to love and to grow in love, that's when our vine is wrapping around the tree of spiritual culture. Every single astrological transit is an opportunity for us to, as we are in relation to all of these material experiences that the transits represent, we see those experiences as the raw material around which our spiritual plant, our spiritual vine of devotion can grow. So remember that this weekend. If your ego is challenged, if there's conflict in the air, if sudden disruptions are happening in relationships, if you're feeling like a rebel, just remember that the idea is to love it. How can you love it? And oftentimes, here's the secret, the simplest way to understand how to love something is to figure out what it likes, what someone or something around you likes or needs, and then give it. Serving is the quickest way, really, for us to grow in love. Love is, so much of the time we want to start in this kind of new age culture with self-love. And of course, you have to love yourself. Most people don't know how to love themselves outside of selfish material desires, me included, right? It's very, very difficult. And so one of the simplest ways to learn how to actually love ourselves is to figure out how to love others, how to give and serve something other than ourselves. It sounds counterintuitive. Everyone wants to say you can't love others until you learn how to love yourself. Actually, I think that's bogus most of the time. Most of the time, I think it's complete opposite. Unless you learn how to give and serve, we don't, because the thing is, we don't really know what we want, right? There's a meditation that my spiritual teacher gives where he says, everyone, leads you through this whole meditation. You come to a desire tree where you can have anything you want. You know what the most common responses that people give after he does this exercise? I didn't know what I wanted. It's like people are coming and going, doing all sorts of stuff all the time. But if you pause and you ask them, what do you really want out of life? They'll be like, I mean, I don't know, right? That's not a crime. But the truth is that it's very, very hard to know what we want until we get into the practice of giving to others. So let me give you a simple example. Yesterday, I almost made the mistake of booking this kind of tour for my wife and I that I realized was pretty materialistic, more expensive than it should be, and not money I wanted to spend. And there was a lot of reasons that it wasn't the right decision. Now, if you're in a spiritual paradigm that says that was materialistic and you got it wrong after booking this or paying that money or whatever, then it's a fail. But if you're in a spiritual paradigm of love and of service, then here's a simple way that I learned from friends and teachers to dovetail that kind of maybe what we might think of as a materialistic mistake into something positive. Speaking of cancellations, I said, you know what? This doesn't feel right. I'm spending money on something that's materialistic. It feels like something I should do because I'm on vacation, but I don't really want to do it. It doesn't really feel like it would feed my soul. And so I canceled it, right? And then I used the money but instead of just being like, well, I cancel it and like, thankfully now I've got it right. Pat myself on the back. I did the right thing. No, I didn't do the materialistic thing. I'm so awesome, right? Which we're tempted to do. Instead, I said, well, that was a little bit of a mistake. But the application of this energy, the desire to do something that overcame me, how can I find that same desire and plug it into my spiritual life with the same energy, resources, and money I was about to have, that I was about to spend? I can think to myself, that money is already gone. In my mind, I already parted ways with it, right? I don't want to be miserly and be like, well, I made a mistake. I'm going to correct that mistake, not be materialistic, and I've got more money in my bank account. Like, I could do that. But it wasn't that much money where I like really, really need it, so it was like, okay. And it was already gone in my mind anyway. So I was like, okay, I've got the money back. So I gave it to charity. I gave it to a charity that I love. Simple. So a lot of the times we might make a mistake, or we might do something that we feel is off in some way. And there's a simple way of redirecting that energy back into service or back into love or giving something. So if ever we have the opportunity to grow spiritually, it's often specifically when we serve and give something. That's often how the love grows. So the other reason I mention this is because the Sun in Libra, Venus opposite Uranus, a lot of Mars energy in the air. Sometimes right now you could see there being conflicts or competition over resources. And a simple way of thinking right now that might be able to bypass a lot of the complications and ego entanglements of this moment is to just say, how can I love and serve someone or something other than myself? Really, really simple. And just taking that extra time and thinking, that's my pleasure. I know that if I do that, that will give me pleasure. In terms of everything else that I think I know or want or desire, I'm not really sure if it'll give me pleasure, but I know that giving something to somebody else will make me happy, will give me contentment inside. So that's what I'm going to do, because at least I know that much. We keep serving in this way. This is also a way of saying, oh, again, Mars intrudes on your path, some other planet comes in and starts, you feel like your plot's getting really interrupted, and you look and you just say, I know that what will make me happy right now is if I figure out a way that I can serve this moment, that I can love this moment, that I can give something to this moment. Guess what we receive in return from that? Inner contentment. And where there's inner contentment, there's self-knowledge. And when we know ourselves, then we actually know what we want and what we desire. And it turns out it's going to be more of the same: contentment, peace, and that comes from love. So a simple way to get to love ourselves is to start by loving everything that's happening around us, everything that's happening to us, because it's not separate from us. Okay, so that's what I've got for you guys today. I hope that this was interesting and that I didn't preach on too much here at the end. Have a great weekend. Love each other and see what good can come out of this full moon. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.